let's go to our top 5 use cases here for our top 5 database activity monitoring requirements. And these are kind of regardless of who your database activity monitoring vendor is. But if you look at any of the major analysts, they're going to say that database activity monitoring should track access to, deletion of, or changes to sensitive data from privileged users. You should be able to set up some type of data governance, recognize the before and after values, and be able to track changes to key data elements across activities. And it doesn't matter whether that was done via stored procedures or changes to stored procedures or changes to users' entitlements. You need to be able to detect when someone is accessing more data than they should. One of the most common ways that databases get breached is through compromised credentials. And that might be a DBA's credentials, that might be an application server's credentials, it might be some BI intelligence user that's coming in and looking at data. But when those credentials get compromised, one of your early indicators are those accounts suddenly begin to pull massive amounts of data out of the database. An account that normally does single row queries starts pulling chunks of 1,000 rows or 10,000 rows or 10 million rows. So noticing when someone is accessing excessive amounts of data is a key indicator that there's a problem going on. When you see someone who is accessing data through an inappropriate or non-approved channel, think of it like this. Databases are like your dad. Databases are like your dad. They should be doing the same things over and over again. And if your dad is doing something new, there's probably something wrong going on because we do the same things over and over again. So if all of a sudden you see that application ID that normally logs in from the application farm pop up on an IP subnet that's, you've never seen touch your database before and start trying to pull data out, this is a key indicator of compromise. Okay? And then the last one is, when is someone accessing unauthorized data or attempting to access unauthorized data, and what types of SQL are they pushing in? Are you looking at something that might be a SQL injection attack? One of the more interesting engagements I ever had with a customer is I was working with a very, very large telecom provider, and we were actually demonstrating Audit Vault and Database Firewall. And during the demonstration, we were on a live system showing how the database firewall could track activity coming through. And we saw a query come in that was we saw a login come in, login failed. And after about 3 tries, we saw the login succeed. Okay, nothing too suspicious there. Then we saw that same account. We're watching this live go through and attempt to access a table, and the table didn't exist. Then they tried to look at DBA tables, and they didn't have privileges. Then they looked at user tables, and it was just an obvious attempt to try and recon the system, find out where stuff was. We traced that IP address back to where it was coming from, and it turned out to be someone who had just been hired in the call center that was poking around trying to steal data. So when you see people trying to access data unauthorized, those failures tell you a lot about what's going on in your system. Okay, so let's look at our top 5 ways to get value out of our system when these are our 5 things that we want to look at. All right, you probably are all aware by now, Audit Vault and Database Firewall, as the name implies, allows you to gather data in 2 different ways. You have an audit component, which has an audit agent, which pulls the audit trail out of almost anything that can produce an audit source. That audit trail can be something that we have a pre-built connector for, like Oracle database or SQL Server or IBM or one of those, or it could be some custom target that's producing audit data in a CSV format or a JSON format or an XML format, or writing its audit data to a database trail. But we're pulling system data out with the audit component and moving that into the audit warehouse for analysis, alerting, and reporting. You also have the database firewall, which is network-based monitoring that is tracking the incoming SQL commands to your databases. Here, your target list is a little bit narrower because we actually have to build parsers for those. So with audit, we make the claim almost anything that produces an audit trail, Audit Vault can work with it. The firewall component works Oracle database, Microsoft SQL Server, IBM DB2, SAP Sybase, and MySQL, and that's where the database firewall works. But these come together to provide you a holistic look at the activity for your system. If you're only using one, you're leaving part of the value on the table. And we have lots of customers that do this. We have customers that get into this mindset. I'm only going to use the database firewall because I don't want to turn on auditing. Well, then, they don't see anything that happens locally. They don't see what stored procedures do. There's activity that gets missed. We have customers that only do the audit vault piece of it and don't do the database firewall because, I don't know, it's too hard to route to the network, or it's just too much work, or I don't think I need it. But if you do that, then all that the audit vault sees are the events that are audited. You miss that bigger picture of all of the other traffic that's coming into the system. So you really need both of them. And in terms of blocking, of course, only the firewall can block activity. So audit vault and database firewall, that's what does these 5 core use cases. It works with almost anything that produces an audit trail. It integrates with things like the database security assessment tool and enterprise manager to help identify sensitive data and discover attempts to access sensitive data that are inappropriate. And the real thing is it moves your audit data into a repository outside of the system that generates the audit trail. And that's great from an auditing standpoint. That's great from a forensic support standpoint. And it really gives you a little bit more confidence in your ability to detect what's going on. Okay. Audit Vault is comprehensive, as I'd already mentioned. Sorry for getting ahead of myself there. We do both network monitoring and database auditing. And again, thinking in terms of doubling your value. If you're only using one, then you're only using half. So 2 times half gives you 1. So hopefully, if nothing else, you look at the one you're not using after today's session. All right. We're going to take you now through 5 core use cases. 5 core use cases. And before I turn it over to Nazi, I just want to give you a quick preview into these use cases. The first one is reporting, and there is a special type of reporting around sensitive data access. You may have been using Audit Vault for a while and not have caught that we added this capability in, but the ability to combine sensitive data discovery with audit reporting is one of the most powerful things that Audit Vault and Database Firewall can do. And so we'll show you how to do that. Another thing that Audit Vault and Database Firewall does is it supports data governance. How do you detect before changes and after changes to sensitive data elements? And sometimes you have to be able to show a breadcrumbs trail. Someone's salary went up $1, someone's salary went down $1, someone's salary went up $10, someone's salary went up $1. The day before payday, someone's salary went up $1 million. The day after payday, it went down $1 million. You can see where tracking before and after values can get really important. We'll talk about how to use Audit Vault and Database Firewall to detect that all-important information. What happens when someone starts selecting more data than they normally do? Is this a data exfiltration attempt? We'll talk about using Audit Vault and Database Firewall to provide database vault-like protections, both the Oracle databases and non-Oracle databases, where you can set up a trusted path to your data. And finally, we'll cover Sql Injection and how you can use Audit Vault and Database Firewall to monitor and analyze the incoming SQL traffic to your database and either detect or prevent SQL injection attempts. All right. And Nazi, I think I'll turn it over to you now.
Yeah, thank you, Russ. I'll just share my deck.
All right, we are seeing your slides now. Oh, well, actually, now we're seeing it in presenter mode. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, thank you again, everyone, for joining AVDF Cafe. Like Russ mentioned, it's going to be a quarterly series of AVDF Cafe, and every quarter we'll come up with some new exciting function. For example, this one is more focusing on how you can get more value out of your AVDF deployment. For example, next one, we may do a different architecture or different deployment model. We have many customers who has question on that, issues on that, so we can discuss that and many more exciting functions. So I'm just adding what Russ mentioned in the starting of the call. So from here onwards, I will cover those top 5 use cases that we discussed that experts suggest, and then it map backs to the AVDF functionalities as well. If you have any question, you can use Q&A channel. We have experts on the call to answer. This is your chance to get, I would say, best answer, because we have development leads also on the call, Vijay and Sachin. It's very difficult to get their time, and they are on the call to answer your maybe most difficult or critical question if you have any. Okay, so here onwards, the structure is we'll talk a little bit about the database auditing. Like we mentioned, DAM is a comprehensive solution. It has a two part of it. One is the database auditing, and second one is more network-based SQL monitoring. So I'll focus on use cases first on the database auditing and how you should plan your database auditing, what are the things you need to do, and then followed by the use cases. And the similar process I'll do for database firewall. We will talk about how you should plan your database firewall implementation, what are the best practices while putting the policies, etc. And then I'll demonstrate the use cases, focus on the use cases and demonstrate those use cases. So they are the top things you should consider when you are enabling or using Oracle database auditing capability. The first question comes is like what to audit, how to provision audit policies, and then the final one, I mean, how do you size AVDF for that audit volume? Okay, so what to audit? I'll say one size doesn't fit all. It's more on your requirement, but suggestion is always that you should not audit everything. You should be very selective and focus on your needs. Maybe your needs are driven by regulatory compliance, or maybe your needs are driven by some security incident happen, or let's say industry requirements, okay, or a specific industry you belong to and their requirement. So it depending on what your need, so you have to be very selective and focused, so that you can gather effective amount of information and which can meet your requirement. How you can provision, we have made database auditing enablement very simple, very easy. That's available through AVDF, whether it is it is a core or a basic audit policies which are there on the database. You can provision them from AVDF, and as well as there are the additional auditing policies which you can provision from AVDF. Going forward, I have a slide for each of this, so we will talk more about on detail. And then there is a sizing tool we provide through our MOS node to help our customers so that they can size their AVDF properly, and we advise them how your what could be the resources, what resources could be required on to implement effective AVDF server or database firewall server. Okay, so what to audit is very first part when you are planning your database auditing. So I would say that your major focus should be on 3 parts, which is like your privileged user activity monitoring. Like we said, that it has to be selective and effective. And as an industry best practice, while interacting with different customers, we realized that privileged user activity monitoring is one of the important part. It's a common requirement across the industry or across the customer size. The second could be security relevant event audits. For example, you are using database vault, or you are using some other like real application, RAS, or there are other, data pump and other activities which are happening on your system, and your audit policies, what you have deployed. So anything related to security events, that has to be audited. And finally, we suggest that sensitive data access auditing should be enabled on your system. So when we say selective, so your selection becomes a privileged user, the type of users, the type of data, that's a sensitive data, and the type of events, which becomes your security relevant events. So these are the three portions that ideally you should focus to start with. And then obviously the customization goes forward depending on specific needs of your organization. Then how do you provision those audit policies? Like I mentioned, there are the three ways we say that you can provision, especially for Oracle database auditing. So one is that there are in AVDF, there are predefined audit policies. We have done basic audit policy where we monitor or audit all critical database activities and any schema changes, any DDL, alter commands or a create, etc. So any schema changes is what we monitor, as well as critical database activity. We also say all admin activity, and wherever you see star, it's basically Oracle recommended ones that we say that you should provision these policies, and you can push those policies from AVDF to your respective Oracle database targets. The second one is that the policies which are there in Oracle database itself as a predefined, and you can push those policies, you can provision those policies from AVDF console itself. Beyond what we have given you as predefined, whether it is through AVDF predefined audit policy or Oracle database itself predefined audit policy, we give you capability to implement custom policies where you really want to have some very specific requirements. So for example, one of the example I would say that if you are using unified auditing and customer has you decide to use a database firewall to monitor all your network-based activities or network-based SQLs. So the only activity which you are missing is any local connection or a direct connection to the system, right? So you can define one custom policy where you say that enable unified auditing just for my local connections, where let's say the host is localhost or 127.0.1. So if you're using any putty session or any direct bequeath or shared memory connection you are doing to the system, the local connections, that will be captured from unified, and rest everything you are doing from database firewall. So it's a best of both worlds. You are not loading your Oracle database with a lot of audit data created on system, whereas you are getting 100% visibility. Okay, that's the one of the example of custom policy, I would say that. So there are the three ways you can provision. You can use combination of that. That's the best way, I would say, to provision Oracle database auditing on the system. Okay, the last one and the very important one I have seen while interacting with many customers, this becomes one of the important part, that whether their AVDF deployment is properly sized or not. Okay, so in AVDF deployment, you have two components. You have database firewall as well as audit vault. So audit vault, as we know, is your centralized data warehouse for audit records, whereas database firewall is more to render and understand your network-based SQLs and direct it to audit vault server. So most of the processing, most of the heavy work, most of the labor is basically done with your audit vault server. So sizing your audit vault server becomes very important part. So this particular Moss note, I don't know if this is, yeah. We keep on updating depending on the stress testing and enhancements we do in the product. Here in this, we collect two kind of information. One is that for your audit category, and the second information we collect for the database firewall. So both kind of information we collect, and we ask you that you segregate, or you understand your system well. So how much number of targets you feel that they have a heavy auditing or a medium level of auditing or a low level of auditing. We have given some numbers to help you out, but you can modify these numbers. And so we ask you to put input like average audit records per day per target, and then what is the retention policy you want to define, etc. And accordingly we size. Similarly for the agents, we size that, what kind of an agent, and per agent how many trails you are going to have, and similarly then we suggest that how much more resources your that particular target may require. Okay. There are some stress testing we have done, but for example, we say that AV server throughput 1,000 records per second per core. So this is more we are saying from IO bandwidth perspective, but this number change significantly if we understand your IOPS as well. So either you can do it through support, you mentioned to them, and then they can contact us and we can give the enhanced sizing. And we are in process of enhancing this sizing sheet itself. So that will consider your IOPS. So for example, if you have like good IOPS system, your throughput becomes really, really very good, very high. Usually we say that 20 audit trail per agent and maximum 1,000 targets per audit vault server. But we keep on doing stress testing with the different configuration and keep on updating the sheet. So sizing of your AVS is very important part. Okay, now coming to the database Audit Vault and database firewall use cases. So the very first use case that Russ mentioned, that experts are saying that it's very important that you monitor anything what is happening with your sensitive data. Okay, sensitive data activity monitoring is very important. I'm sure when you are using AVDF, you are using AVDF for a lot of other things, and there is an interactive reporting. You are utilizing capability of interactive reporting, which is giving you 100% view through the audited database or audit piece of Oracle database or non-Oracle database, as well as network SQL captures what we do. However, you can extend those reporting capability when you are telling AVDF that what is sensitive for you, what data is sensitive for you. And this is one of the requirement even in EU GDPR as well, that you monitor access to sensitive data, or you monitor access rights to your sensitive data, etc. So this is one of the use case. If you haven't configured it, I think it's really worth configuring it. We captured what is sensitive data, discovery of sensitive data by integrating. You can do that by integrating Oracle solutions like database security assessment solution or Oracle Enterprise Manager application data model, etc. So first thing that I will log in through AV admin. And when you have registered your target, so there is an option of sensitive objects. So you can train, or you can tell Audit Vault that I'm uploading this data, and this sort of information, this sort of data is basically a sensitive data for me. Okay, so here I have uploaded data from DBSat, as you say that, because the database security assessment tool provides capability of assessing the security posture of your Oracle database, as well as the discovery, like what is sensitive in your system. So I'm using DBSat capability and uploading that CSV file. So you can upload XML or CSV file here. So this has been uploaded here, and telling AVDF that this is my sensitive data. So if anything happens to that is what I want to monitor. Okay. To see that reports, I'll log out from AV admin, and I will log in back to AV auditor. you go to reports, see compliance reports. So if you go to GDPR, you can define data privacy reports is what we are seeing here. You can select the targets, you can select the group of targets if you want to generate that report. Right now I have one target registered to my system, which I'm saying is part of my GDPR group. And this one particular Oracle target is what holding for GDPR. So I have selected that group. And then if you go to different reports, it's basically telling you, okay, this is the target, this is the schema, this is all the detail that we have uploaded through CSV. Is telling you that this is your sensitive data, okay, whatever we have uploaded from here. So if you go back to GDPR report and now you want to see that what activities are happening on this particular sensitive data, so you will see that, okay, there was update event happen on where sensitive columns, whatever we have mentioned are sensitive column, are being used and event was successful. There was a select happen on this particular target, on this particular object or table where user was DBA, and there was a select happen for one particular user ID, or there was an update happen on this particular sensitive object by the user. Okay, so it's giving you a detail that these sensitive columns have been used, and this is the command ran on that particular by the privileged user on your sensitive data. You can click on that paper icon, you can have more detail if you want to see it, etc. What for example, a lot of information comes in the extension as well. So you can see that, and a lot of information you will get from the detailed paper icon. Okay, so this is part of sensitive data discovery. If you are not using it, I would say that start using it. Tell AVDF what is your sensitive data through XML or CSV information, and upload that data, and Oracle database auditing will start monitoring those sensitive data activity. Okay, so now coming back to our presentation, the second use case where we are talking about capturing the value change. Okay, the value change could be a data value change, that's before after value. A lot of compliance required this particular a lot of regulatory compliance ask for such kind of a report where they want to see a before after value for certain objects. Our value change can be in your entitlements. So for example, you have some entitlement today and tomorrow some other entitlement happen, and AVDF can give you entitlement drift as well. So you can have a snapshot at different time of period, and then you can compare them. So first look at tracking before after value. So I have seen before after value, I would say that this is more from my personal experience. I have seen other DAM solution also capturing before after value. I would say that the way now Oracle captures is the most efficient or elite way we do it, because we have integrated Oracle Golden Gate microservices into AVDF so that you can have your change data capture in most efficient way. So others, I have seen them using Oracle Stream capability, and mostly they provide support for Oracle. I haven't seen them providing support for non-Oracle system for before after value, and they use Oracle Stream, etc. to do it. That's more it leads to a lot of changes to your database instance if you are not using it, and then capturing that information. Whereas with Golden Gate, we have made all that process much simpler, and I would say that our flexibility to maybe expand to non-Oracle databases maybe in future, because that's what Golden Gate supports today, right? And you already have a lot of customers using Golden Gate for their CDCs, okay, chain data captures. So that might not be something new for them, and they are already using it. So as a process, you have target, you register your target with integrated Golden Gate microservices. You define your extraction policy, that what you want to extract, and then it extracts that information, gives that trail back to Audit Vault agent, and Audit Vault agent relay it to Audit Vault server. That's what its job is. Transaction log collector is what Audit Vault agent does, and it sends that data to Audit Vault server, and Audit Vault server generates before after value. So we will go through the use case. I'll show you what we do. Basically, there are snapshots from the report, but we will see ourselves. And this is the snapshot for privileged user entitlement drift, for example. So let's go back here. First thing I will show you on, once you enable configure Golden Gate services with your target database. So you will come here. To the Golden Gate console. You will configure your file here. So now credentials, basically, you will configure your credentials here. I have configured my credentials. I have given all the details, like basically this is a connection for database, right? So I have given all my details that through this user on this port, I'm connecting to CDB1 system. Okay. And then you start, you can configure other points like checkpoints or a transaction information if you want, or you want to set the heartbeat in Golden Gate, you can do all that. Okay. And once you do that, you start putting the extraction, right? What extraction capability is what you want to do. Okay. And other details like, encryption profile or manage options, etc. So if you look at here, this is the extraction query I'm mentioning. I'm saying that employee search _ prod .star is what I want to be extracted. So you define your integrated extraction policy here in Golden Gate. And once you have done that, you come back to the Audit Vault system. And here you will add another trail. So remember, in AVDF, we configure different type of trails. So for this one, we want to configure transactions. So one trail is for me is basically unified audit trail. The second one trail type will be transaction log. Okay, so transaction log is for my before after value is what I have configured here. Okay, there are two types of trail now configured in my system. I will log out and let's you go to the reports. There are queries I have run in advance to show you the value change. So you have data under data access and modification. There is all activity report which you can run. You can define your filters. You can save that report, and that report will go to your saved reports. For example, like I have done all activity, DML, direct connection, or Oracle, or action taken, etc. So you can do that. Whereas in data access and modification, you will have data access and data modification, DDL and DML kind of a report. Also, you will have data modification before after values, which can be scheduled and generated as well. So if you come here, this is like within last 24 hours. Sorry. Yeah, this is what it captures. So the old value getting changed here. and event was successful. So if you look at this, this is direct connection, JDBC thin client, because I have an application running and I am doing some update from that application as well. So it's capturing before after value for I have mentioned the user for anything for employee search underscore prod in my extraction rule. So whether I'm connecting directly or I'm connecting through JDBC client or through application is what I'm capturing right now. But you can further drill down and actually separate that information as well. So for this user, basically, I have changed whether this is the city. Okay, so from Toronto to Dallas, and this user was deactivated. I activated that particular user, and then you will see there are backend changes where the salary change happened for user, or their name change, last name, and the new name value change happening. These are more direct connection or SQL plus connection to your system, and these are more your application connection to your system. Any update you are doing or a value change you are doing on this particular user, that's employee search underscore prod objects. So this is getting reflected here. Okay, so these are the two important use cases I wanted to cover from auditing part of it, from the auditing perspective. Now let's talk more about from the database firewall, or a network-based SQL monitoring perspective. Quickly, I will show you entitlement drift as well. So you enable user entitlement capture. There are snapshots created. You can label those snapshots. Okay, so I'm labeling. I can click here. I can say that label. I can name that. There are label here. I can select this label, or I can create my own new label. And for example, I say that that's my April 27th label, right? So you can create that label, and I'm selecting this for the system. So once you go to the report, if you have created those labels, you scroll down, there are entitlement reports. So you will see entitlement activities, very first thing here, that on what host, what client program, what event happened, drop user, create user, different, whether it was failure, success, I've done from different ones. So it's a failure because this user doesn't have permission to create user, etc. And the system user had permission. If you want to see the drift, we'll go and let's say if there are privileged user changes happening. Okay, so maybe I'll select latest, and I want to, yeah, so no. So I have the later date should come here, and then I want to compare with the latest one. So two labels I have selected, and now you can see, okay, on this particular target, the privilege was this, and the change was modified. Privilege and role for latest one is this, and admin, this is admin, no. Okay, this is new activity. And here you will see there is no change happening. So you can capture any change, new or unchanged. So any entitlement drift will get highlighted here in the system. Okay, and similarly, you can see other privilege reports from, other entitlement reports from this particular entitlement report section. Okay, now we will go back to the presentation and we will talk about database firewall piece of it, or a network-based SQL monitoring, or or a monitoring of SQL traffic, which are coming through network. Okay, so what should you monitor? Again, question comes it, and how to do it. Okay, very first thing is that you should start with log unique policy. which is basically a training mode, I would say, in AVDF. Okay, and that's very unique to database firewalls. Many of customer, when I talk and I say that you should start putting database firewall policy, and I get answer that we really don't have a very in-depth information that what we should monitor and what we should not monitor. So we suggest that you put your database firewall in training mode. You start doing a log unique policy so that your database firewall start capturing a lot of activities. And let's say when database firewall is running for a week or two, and then you realize that, okay, these kind of transactions, or these kind of these set of users, or these set of IP addresses are trusted users or trusted IP addresses for me, and I don't want to really block them, or I don't want to get alerted if they do something, or I don't want to, maybe I want to log it, but I don't want to get alerted or block, or maybe I don't even want to log those information. So then you will start slicing your traffic, that what's your focus area, so that you can do very effective monitoring through the data which is captured. Okay, so from database firewall perspective, it really provides you that that capability at very fine grain level. So your SQL, you run your SQL through log unique, and then you start your putting your policy. So very first rule you can define is basis on session context. Session context will have your DB user, IP address, client program, OS user. You can define profile, that this is a trusted profile for me. I don't want to combination of these, and then you say that this is a trusted profile for me, or this is a DBA profile for me, and then you decide whether you want to pass, alert, block, or log, or whatever the activity you want to do that. So you go at that very fine grain level, and then you can even filter your SQL statements. So when you log unique is capturing a lot of SQLs coming in your system, you create SQL cluster set, and you say that, okay, these are the set of SQLs which are my application SQLs, and these are my trusted SQL, or these are my whitelisted SQL. Okay, if anything happened beyond this, if any SQL which is not set of my whitelisted set of SQL, it goes to, let's say, my default rule, where I say that, okay, this is unknown traffic, and I want to block that particular activity. Okay, similarly, you can define your database objects rule. So you say that these are set of objects, or a combination with session context and the object, database object, or SQL with database object, and you say that these are type of commands, or these are type of objects I want to monitor, or I want to, and I don't want to block them, or certain kind of a combination is that what I want to block. So you go at you start with log unique, and slowly you slice down by using different capabilities. Database firewall provide you under policy different category of rules, or a combination of rules, and finally you get a very effective reporting and alerting that you want. Okay, and you monitor everything which is unknown, and you can configure, in fact, escalation as well, basis on the SQL traffic pattern, if it is getting repeated for twice or thrice in certain amount of time. So that's also something very unique to Oracle. Okay, so now we will look at three use cases of database firewall. The very first one I would like to focus on, create a trusted path to data. So what you don't want to monitor, okay? And then you say that I don't want to monitor this. So you create a user profile defining what is trusted for you and what is not trusted for you, so that you can reduce false positives. You do not get a bulk of alerts, or you end up blocking activities that you really don't want to block, and it's a denial of service kind of a thing for you. It becomes a denial of service kind of a thing for you. You do limiting data access by different session context values, and finally you define your desired action. So let's go back to Audit World. I have logged in through Auditor. On database firewall, let's pick my trusted path to application policy. Okay, so if you look at this policy, I have created a set of trusted IP address. So you can click add, and then you can even, you can have a bulk insert here, or you can import it from the file. Let's say you have a set of application server IP addresses, and you say that anything which goes to my application is my trusted one, because I already have a multiple layer of security, for example, database firewall, and then other security layer. So any connection which is reaching ultimately to my application server is my trusted connection, and I don't want to monitor them. So you upload maybe list of your application servers or whatever the data we have collected, that from which all IP addresses your connections are happening to the system is listed here. So you select those collected IP addresses and you define your set. So here I have said that this is my trusted IP address. I've defined one particular IP address. In DB user sets, I have said that, okay, these are 2 users which are my trusted users. So I've defined my trusted user. There is nothing I have defined on OS user set. You can do that. And in client program, I have defined 2 client programs. I'll show you how I'm using this. Okay, so there is one client program which is trusted for me is SQL Plus, and the second one is my JDBC thin client. I could have done one program and added both, but I'll show you why I have put them separately, because I'm going to use them in profile, and I'm going to create 2 different profiles. So I'm creating one as a DBA profile, and I'm saying that where everything, IP addresses is trusted, this user is trusted, but my connection is through SQL Plus. And the second one is my application profile, where my client program is basically JDBC thin driver. Okay, so once you have created your profile, you go back here and you define your rule for the policy. So here in the session context, very first thing I said that, okay, application trusted path for me is that it's coming from IP address, which is a part of my trusted IP address. It's coming from the user, which is part of my trusted user. And it is coming from the client program or source program, which is my trusted client program. I want to pass them, but log always. So I don't want to block, or I don't want get alerted, but I just want to log that activity for always. Okay, so that's what my application trusted path I have used. There's nothing I have mentioned in SQL statement. Then in database object, I have created 2 rules. So one, I'm saying my DBA profile, you can select the profile you have created. I have selected my DBA profile, and I'm saying that my DBA, if there is a DML activity, my DBA profile is doing, and that's basically the user and IP and SQL Plus. If there is updation happening on any of the object, you block. So for example, so here what I'm saying that my DBA can go, and if you see allowed commands, can do all the activities from backend on my employee search _ prod schema or user, but he cannot update the data from backend. Okay, but you can update the data from front end. And then your default policy, where we are saying anything which is not part of that, it's what I want to get blocked. Okay, that's the policy, and I have given substitute SQL for that. Okay, now let's go ahead and deploy this particular policy on the target. Right now, my database firewall was running in training mode. That's a log unique mode. I'm implementing trusted path to application. Now let's go to the application. And try to do certain activity. Try to update something. I modify, I inactive this particular user, save changes, this user become inactive, okay? Because in my policy, I didn't say that JDBC update is not allowed, because that's my trusted way of updating data, okay? Now I'll come back to my database system, and here, okay, I'll connect with proxy, because I have deployed database firewall in proxy mode. So I'll connect I'll connect with user employee search underscore prod. And let's say I'll do certain, okay. Okay, now let's see if I do update. Am I allowed to do that? No. So I'm not allowed to do any direct update through SQL Plus, but I'm able to select the data and I can do that update through JDBC, right? You can go as innovative as you want. I always say that you can use multiple combinations, and then you can define that what, that's the one way I have created my trusted path, but there are different ways you can do your trusted path as well. Coming back to the presentation, the next use case, what we are talking about is data exfiltration. That means if a lot of data is being accessed by user, is what I don't want, my data get exfiltrated to DBAs or to other users, right? So here we configure database firewall to capture return rows or a return number of rows. You select object, and then you defined alert. You use capabilities of alert ID, etc. if you want to further get integrated with any other system. Okay, so let's go back to the system and look at policy we have created for data exfiltration. So here, if you will see, I haven't created any profile or any set in this particular policy. Okay, so this is for everything, all user. I do not have any session context and SQL statement policy as well. I have defined database object policy, okay. I have defined database object policy where, let's see how it looks like, okay. So it's not associated to any of the, it's not associated to any of the profile, but I'm saying that any select, you return select on these objects. I have defined the selective objects here, and I'm telling the actions that you pass, but you log always. Okay, I want to capture the return number of rows for these objects on the select command. Okay, so this is troubling me. Okay, okay, and now on the default rule, I'm saying that sorry, I want to get alerted. So if anything doesn't fall under that object and rows is still collected, is what I want default alert. You can also define alert policy where I'm saying that if row count is more than 100 and target is like this, target object is like, demo underscore HR, for example, I want that to be alerted so that you can further, have an email notification, etc. Right? So let's go ahead and deploy this particular policy on our database firewall. Okay, and let's go back to SQL. I'm disconnected. Let's connect back and try to run certain query where we will have a lot of data selected. So for example, 1,000 rows from this particular table. Okay, 415 from this. Now go back here in the browser and you go to reports, all activity. In all activity, you can select a lot of columns if you want. So for example, I want to see row count. I will select row count. If you want to select any other column, you can even do that. For example, command class or yeah, command text, for example, etc. So you go and do that. And if you want, you can filter out. Okay. So for example, I say that. Okay. Command class select and row count I want to capture. Yeah. So you will see row count. It takes a little bit time to come here. Those queries, these are some queries I ran certain few minutes back, so you can see that data. Yeah. Okay, so it will come in select, so that's why I have selected it. And then you will have row counts for different. I ran a lot of queries. So some of query ran before I applied this particular policy. So here you will see previously when I ran certain queries on select a star from supplemental or demo HR employee, etc. Because and same thing will be captured in the alerts, because alerts, I say that anything more than 100. So you see PI exfiltration alert, that's the alert policy name was on this particular object. So you go, you click on, you will see, okay, this is the condition which was applied. And if you want, you can close that particular alert. You review the data, for example, first, and then you go and 415 rows collected. You see that, okay, this is the authenticated activity happen or authorized activity happen on my system, and I want to close this particular alert. So I'm closing this particular alert. Okay. So that's how you capture PI information, exfiltration alerts or data exfiltration you get in your reports. Now let's go back to the presentation and let's look at a third and final use case. So third and final use case is preventing Sql injection. So basically, database firewall provides you capability that where you can train your engine that what SQLs you want to be allowed, or you can whitelist your SQLs and you see that how many times this particular SQL is running on your system, whether this is when it was first time seen or last time seen. All that information is being captured in database firewall for you to create your whitelist, which is very unique to database firewall. The other unique capability we do that when we run this in training mode and capture SQLs, these values are SQL values in the database firewall is what masked, so that there is no sensitive information is being passed to you while you are defining the policies and generating and defining the policy and defining the action top of those policies. You can define that with sets, SQL cluster set, or you can assign that to particular profile as well that we discussed earlier as well. So let's go back and again, we will go back to the policy, and there is another policy that we have created. That's a HR policy. If Let's go to the sets and the profile. So you will see that there is no other set and profile I have defined. If I want, I can create conditions, and I say that, okay, and select a profile and saying that, okay, this is my application user profile. This profile can run this particular cluster, SQL cluster set. So I can go even more fine grain in this particular example. I'm not going at that level. So I have defined one SQL cluster set. So it captures your all SQL. You can say that SQLs which are captured in last 24 hours. So for example, if I click on add, right? When you create a new cluster set, so you say cluster set, and then on which target, and then you say last week, last month, or you want to give a date range, and you go and it gives you all the SQLs which basically ran in last 24 hours. And then you select all and you say that, oh, I don't want to allow the drop command. That's not something I want to do. Or I do not want system to running select star kind of a activity or select star tab. And then you select these, you save, and you say that, okay, this is the new profile. This is the new SQL cluster set created. Right now, this is the SQL set I have created where I have said that what is allowed and what is not allowed. So now, when my database firewall was running in the training mode, I have selected all the queries that I want to make sure it's kind of a whitelisted query for me. Okay. So, and then you are defining here in the SQL statement your rule where you're saying that, okay, allow SQLs. You can, if you would have created profile, you could have assigned profile to it. And then you're saying, this is the SQL cluster, HR SQL cluster is what I want that to be passed, but, and I don't even want to log. Because I know these are my whitelisted SQL, but what I'm saying that if any unknown traffic, if any SQL run over and above what I have whitelisted, I want that to be blocked. Okay. So if we go back to our application right now, since this particular rule is not applied, you go back to your application. And we have done a debug mode so that we can see the query. You see all this particular query ran on the system, and you can see all the data. Okay. Now what we have done is that, for example, I'm using one SQL injection query. I'll show you here. So single quote union, and then I'm trying to capture all sensitive information, right? Ended with dash dash. This is a typical union-based SQL injection. So I'm trying to do this attack. And in the end, if you see, yeah, this is the query ran on the system, and I'm getting account number and the routing number, etc., through my application. I'll go back to the target and on the database firewall, and I will deploy my HR policy. Okay, HR policy is deployed. Now come back to the application. And let's see, I don't want to, I'll just refresh the tab. I run this particular query, so everything is coming. Even if I go and select one particular record, you will see that particular record is coming. Now let's pass the SQL injection query and see if it blocks that. Okay, so there is no result shown because remember in the default rule, we did substitute where we say that where 1 is equal to 2, so that will not return any value. And hence, even on the Sql injection, there is no value returned on this particular application. So that's how you can utilize database firewall with few more innovative use cases. If you are not using these use cases, I would say that you should implement these use cases in your environment. If you need any help, you can always come back to us. With this, I have reached to the final slide. Before I do that, I'm going to run a poll, and I'm going to launch this poll. This poll will be there for a minute. There are 5 questions to this poll, and I encourage you to answer this, participate in this poll. This is going to help us in deciding what you really want in AVDF, how you are using our product. So this is going to be very helpful to us.
And folks, the number of questions was a little low. Just as we're coming towards the next ones, let me ask this of you. If you have something you would like us to cover in the next cafe, just send us an email. You can either send it to Nazia or me. I think you have both of our emails, and we will try and get the right people on. We do, I mean, this isn't sales, this isn't support, so there's no fluff intended here. We're just trying to make sure you get the information you need to get the most out of your investment in Audit Vault. So if there's something you want us to talk about, please do let us know, and we will try and work that into the next session. And with that, I think everyone who was going to answer the poll has answered it. So should we go ahead and close it out, or do you want to finish this home?
Yeah. And after this,
there's one question that just came in chat.
So Russ, I want to mention, after this, you will have survey 2, and you will getting a post-event survey. Fill out that survey, because that's really going to help us on product direction and what session do you want to have and going forward, etc. And what is your interest basically on AVDF topic. So that's going to really help us.
Nazia, Sachin, Vijay, thank you so much for giving up a good chunk of your time for this, and we look forward to seeing you in the next cafe.
Yeah, thank you everyone for taking out this time and joining AVDF Cafe, and we will see you in next cafe. Thank you.